It's recording? Alright, cool. Hey, what's up, world? Sorry I've been gone for a little while. I got kind of wrapped up with school, work, and kind of just being a scumbag. But I'm back. I'm gonna try to be making like 2 or 3 videos a week again. So let's get this ball rolling. Now, I know everyone talked about Disney like a whole month ago, but I promise nobody covered this story from this perspective. Everyone on the right made this a clear-cut story about Ron DeSantis taking on the Goliath Disney. And everyone on the left made this story basically the polar opposite of that story, in which Disney is the good guy standing up to a tyrannical oppressor. I, on the other hand, saw this story as nothing more than political theater.
This is going to be one hell of a match.
Oh, Bart, I hope you're not taking this seriously. Even a 5-year-old knows that this is as choreographed as any ballet.
Very similar to the not border wall that Texas Governor Greg Abbott built late last year. He spent like $250 million on a border wall that's not even at the border, it's actually inside of Texas. So he basically spent $250 million to build a giant wall in the middle of nowhere in Texas. It doesn't stop any illegal immigrants. It doesn't do anything useful. What it does do is it creates a greater flood risk for that area because this border wall that he built there will actually prevent rainwaters from washing away or from draining away, however you want to put it. Anyway, I made a video about that late last year, December of 2021. You can check it out if you want. Another bit of political theater that this whole story is very similar to is the erroneously titled Don't Say Gay bill. Now, everyone talked about this Don't Say Gay bill. I was going to make a video about it, but I decided not to. Actually, I didn't really have time to. So I'm just going to quickly say this about this supposed Don't Say Gay bill. This Don't Say Gay bill, I know it's not actually titled Don't Say Gay. I know it actually doesn't say anything about not saying gay in the bill. I'm aware of all that. But this bill basically approves that sort of stuff for kids starting in 4th grade. People don't realize that. The bill is just from kindergarten to 3rd grade. So this bill basically approves kids being taught this this ideology, because that's what it really is, in 4th grade. Now, why couldn't the governor, or why couldn't the Florida legislator come up with a bill that says that the state doesn't have the right to teach kids that stuff? The state has no right to be teaching that stuff to children because it's an ideology that is not universally agreed upon, nor is it universally useful information. You see, the purpose of school, the purpose of the state's school at least, is to teach universally necessary skills and information like reading, writing, math, history, physical education, science, art, and things like that. But yet they think now it's okay to teach these ideological viewpoints, because that's really what it is. Not everyone agrees upon that. There are certain religions that actually believe that it's a sin, but yet the state thinks that it has the right to force this ideology on kids starting in 4th grade, at least in Florida, starting in 4th grade. I know the other states are starting younger, and I guess Florida putting it off until 4th grade is sort of good, I guess, relative to the other states. But the state still has no business teaching kids that. So the whole thing was just a work of political theater, probably designed to psychologically galvanize certain voting blocks. I'm not going to get into that now, though. This is just a massive digression. I'm just simply saying that all of these things that people have discussed over the last couple of months that I've been gone are all examples of political theater. And nobody's pointing that out. Nobody's actually calling it for what it is. Instead, they're choosing a side, and then they're just mindlessly defending that side. No thought of their own. And I, of course, see all of this political theater as more evidence that much of what is happening politically in the world today is part of some elaborate con designed to deceive, distract, and divide so that they can push their hidden and, not so hidden agendas. Let's move on from that rant, and let's begin by looking at some things that the supposed freedom-loving Saint DeSantis has said and done. Like, did you know that DeSantis, the governor of Florida, and the other master of political theater, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, hate the First Amendment? Yeah, that's right. These guys actually hate the First Amendment. These, freedom-loving guys, these freedom-loving saints, they hate the First Amendment. At least that's what it looks like when it comes to their stance on the boycott, divest, and sanction Israel movement, also known as the BDS movement against Israel. I found this particular article on floridagov.com pretty enlightening. It's titled, Governor Ron DeSantis Announces Action to Affirm Florida's Support of Israel. And the article reads, Today, surrounded by a group of bipartisan legislators and faith leaders, Governor Ron DeSantis announced several actions his administration is taking to affirm Florida's steadfast support of the State of Israel. At the event hosted by the Jewish Federation of South Palm Beach County, Governor DeSantis outlined 3 major steps Florida will take to stand with Israel. Of course, 3 steps, right? Quote, Florida is the most Israel-friendly state in the country, and we will not stand for discrimination against the Israeli people of any kind, said Governor Ron DeSantis. By calling for increased security for our Jewish day schools, that means calling for more money for the Jewish day schools, punishing companies that participate in the boycott, divest, and sanction, BDS movement, that basically means punishing companies that are exercising their First Amendment right, and taking my first trade mission to Israel. I don't know how that would be doing what he claims it's doing. Oh yeah, I'm going to take a trade mission to Israel. What does that mean? I have no idea what that really means, what that entails, what he will be doing on this trade mission. The Israeli people can be assured that they have no greater friend than Florida. BDS is nothing more than a cloak for anti-Semitism, and as long as I'm governor, BDS will be DOA. I cannot wait to strengthen the already unwavering bond between Florida and the great state of Israel.
You ask yourself, how could it be, right? Because we're a crazy boys. Sorry, they make us do that.
And then the article goes on to say, Governor DeSantis is calling for a minimum of $2 million in recurring funding for security for Jewish day schools. Following the tragic anti-Semitic attack in Pittsburgh in October 2018, Floridians should feel assured that students and staff are safe at Jewish day schools throughout the state. Parents should not feel worried about sending their children to a specific school based on their faith, and Governor DeSantis looks forward to working with the legislator on this important issue. Okay, now I'm curious. When I read this article, I was curious as to how many Jewish day schools there are in the state of Florida. Now, according to Google, there are 57 private Jewish schools serving the 11,800 students in Florida. So if you take 2 million and you divide it by 57, you get $35,000 per school. So $35,000 per school. Every year, you're basically paying for the school security, for these private school security. Will that money actually go to security? Who knows? Now, of course, I can say a whole bunch of things about the state of Israel, but instead of talking about the state of Israel, I just want to say, I'll keep it very simple, that when you treat one group differently than you treat another group, when you give more to one group than you give to another group, you create animosity between those two groups. Now, moving on to the next great thing about St. DeSantis, something that a lot of people probably don't know about, is that he loves red flag laws. Not just St. DeSantis, but also the Texas Governor Abbott. Now, I will acknowledge that St. DeSantis is pro-constitutional carry. So I know some people will argue that, his stance on red flag laws doesn't necessarily mean that he's against the Second Amendment because he's pro-constitutional carry. And others, I will acknowledge, might even say that there's nothing wrong with red flag laws because they only temporarily take a person's right away from them. I will acknowledge that these two points of view exist out there. Now, the main issue with red flag laws is that the problem with the law being abused is far greater than the law not being there at all. And this law can be abused by both private individuals and the state. Like, let's say there's somebody who has guns and also has a lot of expensive things in their home that some people might want to steal. Could it be possible for someone to create false or misleading evidence against this other person that can then be used by the state as a reason to temporarily take this person's weapons from them so that their property can be more easily burglarized? Or could it be possible that the state's idea of what constitutes a reason to take a person's firearm away from them could change? Like, could these parameters change? And this seems especially likely with the ever-inflammatory rhetoric the state uses against those who protest against it. I mean, we have to remember, just a couple months ago, parents who didn't want their children to be robbed of their childhood innocence were recently considered domestic terrorists. Okay, so these red flag laws, you have to take all of this into consideration. I mean, they're calling people anti-Semitic. I mean, Ron DeSantis calls people who participate in the BDS movement anti-Semitic. It's a slippery slope and a power the government shouldn't have. And I really believe that puppets like Ron are simply the charismatic ones that get the laws passed. They use political theater like what's happening with Disney and the fake pushback against kids being groomed and robbed of their innocence. And then the ones that will really abuse them come later in time. You know, DeSantis, he's not going to be the one to really abuse this power. That's going to come much later down the road. Maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, maybe 30 years down the road. The club, they think long term. Most people, though, they think, oh, what am I going to do this weekend? What's going to happen next month? Super short-term thinkers. Alright, now that I've sort of proven St. DeSantis to be a puppet of the machine, let's move on to the CIA connection to Disney, or more appropriately, the Disney connection to the CIA, to show that Disney itself is a long-time puppet of the machine, of the club. Let's begin by answering this question.
How did Disney obtain the special tax status it has enjoyed for the past 55 years, which is now due to end in June of 2023?
Seems like a simple question. But when you look into it, there's very important information that nearly everyone who attempts to answer it ignores. Everyone who answers this question says pretty much the following.
Disney used multiple shell companies to buy huge tracts of swampland at low prices from unsuspecting landowners, often in cash, to avoid a paper trail.
I mean, there is article after article about how Disney acquired the land in Florida, and article after article says practically the same thing. Article after article ignores what this Daily Mail article doesn't ignore. You see, there's this Daily Mail article titled, Revealed, How the CIA Helped Disney Conquer Florida and Buy Super Cheap Land That Is Above the Law. Now, this article is about a book written by an investigative journalist who was also behind revealing the CIA's secret war in Laos. And obviously, it includes some pretty important details. So let's check it out real quick. So the article starts off by saying this. In 2005, the then chief of Florida Bureau of Fair Rides Inspection summed up the impunity with which Disney World operates when he admitted, quote, "We don't have the authority to close the park down or close the rides." The allegations have been made in a new book, Finding Florida, The True History of the Sunshine State, by investigative journalist Timothy Allman, extracts from which have been published by the Daily Beast. Now, I want to say, if what this reporter is claiming in his book is untrue, how come Disney doesn't sue him for libel? I mean, you would think that's what Disney would do, right? I mean, this is a pretty groundbreaking accusation that Disney has connections with the CIA. But Disney doesn't sue this guy. Disney has never sued this guy. So I'm going to cover this guy's claims as if they're factual. Best known for his work on the CIA's secret war in Laos, and interviews with world figures as foreign correspondent for Vanity Fair, Allman has now turned his attention closer to home with this expose of Florida's murky past. In Finding Florida, he claims that Walt Disney conspired with William Wild Bill Donovan, the so-called father of the CIA. And I'm going to be revealing why Walt Disney would have connections with the father of the CIA. Donovan, founding partner of New York law firm Donovan, Leisure, Newton, and Irvin, whose attorneys include future CIA Director William Casey, provided lawyers to help Disney distract attention from its plans, says Allman. So basically, the CIA had a disinformation campaign or a misinformation campaign in Florida to help Disney get cheap land, okay, or at least to distract attention from its plans. And they would want to distract attention from his plans because if people caught on to what Disney was doing, then he would have had to pay a lot more for the land that he bought. These attorneys, it is claimed, provided fake identities for Disney agents, set up secret communication centers, and organized a disinformation campaign to make sure sellers had no idea who was buying their property. You see, all of these other articles, all of these other media outlets that have covered how Disney got their land, they talk about how Disney used fake identities, how they used shell accounts, but nobody talks about how Disney got a hold of those fake identities and how he got those shell accounts. And it was very simple. They were provided to him by the fucking CIA. In this way, Disney was from the mid-60s able to snap up 40 square miles of land in the Sunshine State for a knockdown price of less than $200 an acre. Now let me put into perspective how much land this really is. The entire land area of Manhattan is 22.82 miles square, 22.82 square miles. Disney got 40 square miles. That means an area that's like twice the size of Manhattan. Okay, that's a huge amount of land, okay? 40 square miles is 25,600 acres. Now, when you do the formula, if you say like an average of $200 an acre, even though the article says less than $200 an acre, when you do the math, you do 200 times 25,600, you can come up with how much he paid for the land, or at least a rough estimate. So Disney got an area of land that's almost twice the size of Manhattan in the Sunshine State for about $5 million. That has to be one of the greatest land deals in the 20th century. Now, let's move back to this Daily Mail article. So after the CIA helped Disney acquire this land for a super cheap price, Disney and his advisors, and when it says Disney and his advisors here, it means Disney and the CIA, then sought a way to limit the voting power of the private residents of the area to control the impact that local democracy might have on the company's plans. They employed a scheme devised by senior CIA operative Paul Helliwell to establish 2 phantom cities populated by hand-picked Disney loyalists around which Disney World would be based. This is some really sick shit what they did here. Really clever, really sick, really corrupt. The cities were based around Bay Lake and Lake Buena Vista, 2 artificial reservoirs Disney engineers created by obstructing the area's natural water flow. Now, when I read this, I didn't know that Disney obstructed the area's natural water flow, but when I read this, you know what I immediately thought of? I thought of the Everglades. I thought of the ever-shrinking Everglades. And I thought, hey, I wonder if what Disney's doing in, northern central Florida, it's more like central Florida, affects the Everglades. Now, unfortunately, I didn't do the research, and even if I did, I wouldn't include it in this video, because then this video would be way too fucking long. But it's definitely something people should look into. This wouldn't surprise me at all, because the club is all about destroying the natural environment so that we then have to be dependent on their artificial environment. So this wouldn't surprise me at all. But anyway, I digress. The company could then use these fake governments to control land use and make sure the public monies the theme park generated stayed in Disney's private hands. Allman writes. Teams of Disney lawyers working out of Donovan's New York law firm drafted the legislation to establish the two pseudo-cities, which was passed by the Florida legislature in 1967. Now, what's interesting is if you look at Walt Disney World, and if you look up where Walt Disney World is located, it does say that it is located, or at least its headquarters are located in Lake Buena Vista and Bay Lake. Now, when you look up Lake Buena Vista, you look up the population, Lake Buena Vista has a population of 4. Those 4 people are all Disney loyalists. They're handpicked by Disney to live there. You have to realize that all of this land Disney bought. The guy, Walt Disney, he bought all of this land. So he could choose who actually lives on the land. So after he bought all of the land, he had the government create these 2 phantom cities. And now these 2 phantom cities, check out what they did. By the way, Bay Lake, which is the other phantom city, has a population of 61. Okay? So, however, in violation of both the U.S. and Florida constitutions, the carefully drafted laws specified that any elected office holder must own property within the cities. The law, which states that each candidate for office must be the owner, either directly or as a trustee, of real property situated in the city, ensured any local politician would be intimately linked with Disney. Alright, let's see how CNN and other people report this aspect of the, well, let's call it what it is, conspiracy.
Walt wanted more freedom to develop the land, and the company petitioned the Florida state legislature to create the Reedy Creek Improvement District, which would give them near autonomy.
Ah, what fluffy language CNN uses. Disney petitioned the Florida legislator. Are you sure they didn't lobby the Florida legislator? You sure they didn't pay them lots of money to create the Reedy Creek Improvement District? And of course, CNN fails to cover the aspect about the 2 phantom cities and their totally undemocratic constitutions, which only allows people who own land to hold public office. Of course, CNN totally ignores that. Practically every other article that reports on this also fails to acknowledge that. And I think this is the case because if people knew this about Disney, then maybe Disney wouldn't be able to act like they care about democracy. And not only do they not report on these constitutions not being democratic, I mean, they don't even report on these 2 phantom cities. Every article that I've read so far about the dissolving of the Reedy Creek Improvement District, every single one of them has failed to acknowledge these 2 phantom cities. And, of course, their totally undemocratic constitution. Now, I'm going to read what the Reedy Creek Improvement District Wikipedia says about the laws that were created, because there were several laws that were created when the Reedy Creek Improvement District was created. So this is from the Reedy Creek Improvement District Wikipedia. On May 12, 1967, Governor Claude R. Kirk Jr. signed the following statutes to implement Disney's plans, specifically Chapter 67764, which created the Reedy Creek Improvement District, Chapter 671104, which established the City of Bay Lake, and Chapter 67-1965, which established the City of Reedy Creek, later renamed as the City of Lake Buena Vista around 1970. According to a press conference held in Winter Park, Florida on February 2, 1967, by Disney Vice President Don Tatum, the improvement district and cities were created to serve, quote, the needs of those residing there, unquote, because the company needed its own government to, quote, clarify the district's authority to provide services within the district's limits, and because of the public nature of the planned development. The original city boundaries did not cover the whole improvement district. They may have been intended as the areas where communities would be built for residential use. Okay, so the point is that even if the new Florida law passed by St. DeSantis gets rid of the improvement district, there's still the two phantom cities controlled by Disney. And this is important for reasons that I will be discussing very shortly. Before I go into the importance of that, though, I want to just quickly show how I believe Disney became connected with the CIA, or how the CIA became connected with Disney, however which way you want to look at it. So, as was mentioned in the Daily Mail article, Disney had help from the father of the CIA in obtaining the land in Florida. So, the question remains, how did he obtain such a relationship? Why was the father of the CIA helping Walt Disney obtain land in Florida? What's the deal with that? In order to understand this relationship, we have to go to the start of World War II, to before the creation of the CIA. Now, if you do your research, you will find that Disney had a lot of financial problems at the start of his career. His first business in Kansas went bankrupt not long after its creation in the early 1920s, and Disney Studios itself was on its way to declaring bankruptcy in 1940. However, Disney's financial problems seem to have completely vanished and never returned after Disney helped make propaganda for the United States government during World War II. And there's a bunch of articles on this too. There's this article, I believe this article is like from Florida.gov or some shit like that. It's titled, How World War II Helped Save Walt Disney Studios. And then it's subtitled, The Symbolic Relationship Between the U.S. Government and Walt Disney. So there's a relationship not just between the CIA and Disney, but the U.S. government and Disney. So this article has a lot of very interesting things. So as the 1940s began, Walt Disney Studios was facing potential bankruptcy. The firm was forced to lay off animators, and a labor strike ensued. The Screen Cartoonists Guild, a union formed in 1938, got involved and attempted to get the workers to join the union. Disney resisted the unionizing efforts, but government intervention ended the dispute. Disney reluctantly agreed to accept organized labor. Still, he continued to resent union workers, even after a settlement was reached. So the thing is, this article, it unfortunately leaves out a very important fact about Disney's financial situation. And that is covered in this article from the website The Wrap. This article is titled, The Year Disney Almost Died and How It Survived to Thrive. So let's look at this article real quick. And this article informs us that when the calendar clicked over to 1941, Disney Studios found itself in nearly $3 million in debt. Bank of America demanded that Walt Disney take major cost-cutting measures. Just a year after its initial public offering of $25 per share on April 2, 1940, company stock plummeted to $4 per share, and then half of Disney's animators decided to strike. So that kind of gives us a little bit more of a background on what really happened in the 1940s. That other article totally left out Disney's debt and totally left out Disney's stock price. So now let's return back to the other article about the relationship between Walt Disney and the U.S. government. So oddly enough, the entry of the United States into World War II in 1941 helped rescue Disney's company from financial ruin. The day after Pearl Harbor, Walt Disney allowed the U.S. Army to, quote, invade, unquote, his Burbank, California studios, making it the only Hollywood studio to ever be occupied by the military. Half of the studio functioned as anti-aircraft protection for a nearby Lockheed aircraft plant for the next 8 months. So right here, this article tries to make it as if the government invaded Disney Studios to serve as like anti-aircraft protection for like a nearby Lockheed aircraft plant. But it's totally not that. That's not what it is at all. So that unusual occupation was just the beginning of a remarkable relationship between the U.S. government and Walt Disney Studios during World War II. Disney and his staff were almost immediately immersed in the war effort. According to Walt Disney Family Museum, studio employees devoted over 90% of their wartime output to producing training, propaganda, entertainment, and public service films, while also designing an extensive collection of insignia and print media. Walt Disney's first government contract, executed right after Pearl Harbor, was with the U.S. Navy. The studio was asked to create 20 war-related animated shorts for a total cost of $90,000. At $4,500 per short, that was more money than Disney typically made for a short film. Naturally, the animation for which Disney Studios was so renowned became the centerpiece of government-funded training films and educational shorts. So basically what I think happened is Disney helped the United States government with their propaganda, and the United States government helped Disney, and then Disney goes on continuing to help the United States government, basically acting as a propaganda outlet for the United States government. Now, this is all part of the grand conspiracy narrative that all of these media outlets are all connected with the club, or at least connected with branches of the government.
Because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
And this isn't any news. This isn't a conspiracy. This isn't something that I'm making up. There's actually this other article from The Atlantic, theatlantic.com, titled How the CIA Hoodwinked Hollywood, okay, from The Atlantic. And from this little information just below the article, it says, ever since its inception in 1947, the CIA has been covertly working with Hollywood.
There's no fucking reason why these...
Yeah, Walter, what's your point?
Huh?
Walter, what is the point? Look, we all know who is at fault here. What the fuck are you talking about?
Huh?
Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make by connecting these different groups to the club is that this should always be a good sign that things aren't what they seem to be. When you see these different heads of the Hydra fighting with each other, you know it's just political theater. You know that there's a psychological operation going on. Now let me present the proof that this whole thing is just that. Theater, or a psychological operation. Now, the 100% proof that this whole thing was just theater can be found on the Reedy Creek Improvement Act Wikipedia. Not the Reedy Creek Improvement District Wikipedia, but the Reedy Creek Improvement Act Wikipedia page. And under the section titled Repeal, you will find that the very first sentence says the following. On April 19th, 2022, Republican Representative Randy Fine and Republican Senator Jennifer Bradley filed identical bills that would dissolve any special independent district established before the November 5th, 1968 ratification of the Constitution of Florida, with dissolution occurring on July 1st, 2023, while any districts that wanted to be reestablished could do so using existing legal procedures. See, you guys get it? This thing does nothing. Absolutely nothing. What will happen is it will repeal, the district will be repealed in 2023, and since Disney owns the cities and the politicians in the cities, well, they can easily get the district reapproved. And if the two phantom cities aren't enough to get this district reapproved or re-put into place, well, the mayor of Orange County, Jerry Demings, spoke out against the repeal of the law, saying that the legislator had not adequately contemplated the ramifications and said it would put an undue burden on taxpayers. So the mayor of Orange County is already against this whole repeal. And since the law, once it repeals it, it makes room for the district to just be reapproved again, or for the district to be recreated, the law literally does fucking nothing. Yes, the law repeals the districts, but it doesn't restrict the districts from being put back into place. It's super political theater. Like, it cannot be any more political theater than this, but it's actually even more dangerous than that, because there's actually potential legal challenges that Disney can make that will exempt them from this law. And not only exempt them from this law, but Disney can actually benefit massively from this law. Check out why, okay? So the reason why Disney can exempt themselves from this law is that Disney was smart enough to put a clause in their contract with the state that forbids the state from altering or limiting the power of the district until all bonds are paid off. Now the way that Disney can take advantage of this whole thing can be found here under potential repercussions and potential legal challenges. So under potential repercussions, it informs the reader, a tax collector from Orange County claimed that the RCIDM's abolition would increase costs for taxpayers. Florida Senate Minority Leader Gary Farmer also highlighted concerns that the dissolution would transfer over $1 billion in bond liabilities to all Florida taxpayers. Now, why would this happen? Under Florida law, when a special district government, like the Reedy Creek Improvement District, is dissolved, the dissolution transfers title of all property owned by the pre-existing special district government to the local general purpose government, which shall also assume all indebtedness of the pre-existing special district. You guys get that? So when the district is dissolved, all of the bond debts, all of the liabilities that Disney has, or that this Reedy Creek Improvement District has, will be transferred to the taxpayer. So what could potentially happen is all of these bonds will be transferred to the taxpayer. The taxpayer will be stuck with that bill, and then Disney, or Reedy Creek, can just come back into being without those pre-existing debts, because Reedy Creek can then say, oh, well, look, that was the previous district, which was dissolved. This is technically, legally, a new district that was created. So I believe this is possible for that to happen, for Disney to get a huge payoff from this thing. Actually, this is me editing this. This is something that I'm putting right now in the editing. While I'm editing this and listening to it and reading it, I'm realizing that this wouldn't be Disney, because Reedy Creek Improvement District doesn't own Disney. So it's not Disney directly benefiting from this, but the heads of this improvement district, whoever is associated with this improvement district, would definitely benefit from this. And the point is that regardless, this improvement district, or one that is very similar to it, can then just be re-put back into place using the current legal channels that are available to them for making these special districts. This is exactly why this guest on CNN said the following.
The best guess, I think, is that the county, as they have done for others, will set up a special taxing district and give Disney back many of the powers it has.
Alright, so let me really wrap this video up. The last thing I'd like to mention is something that was said at the end of the Daily Mail article. And I'm going to try to finish this video off with this last bit of information. So the article ends by saying the following. On the day of the Magic Kingdom's inauguration, Walt Disney, speaking from beyond the grave in a recorded presentation, boasted of creating a new kind of America. Of course, he was right about creating a new kind of America, Allman writes, by turning the state of Florida and its statuettes into their enablers. Disney and his successors pioneered a business model based on public subsidy of private profit coupled with corporate immunity from the laws, regulations, and taxes imposed on actual people that now increasingly characterizes the economy of the United States. Does that sound familiar? It should sound familiar, because that's exactly what just happened with a lot of these pharmaceutical companies. Now, the very last thing that I want to say is I want to just point to what the Reedy Creek Improvement District.org website says about the Reedy Creek Improvement District. So this is, I found this on Google. Reedy Creek Improvement District. Reedy Creek Improvement District, also known as the District, is a progressive form of government created in 1967 by a special act of the Florida legislature. So it's very odd, or it's at least very interesting, that they refer to themselves as a progressive form of government.
You guys played me like a fiddle. Touche.